Hey stat heads, it's your boy Luke, bringing you a preview for this week's Wyndham Championship. Some may prefer to call it the Webb Simpson Open, whatever you want to call it though. It's the last week before the FedEx Cup playoffs. There's a lot of headlines coming in, a lot of drama as well, and I'm really looking forward to this week's event. In this video, we're going to be previewing the tournament for this week, some of the notables who are going to be teeing it up down in Greensboro, as well as a full breakdown of this week's course, which is Sedgefield Country Club. While a lot of my content on this channel is catered towards DFS specifically, and I'm going to continue to do so with my picks, value picks, sleepers, all of that fun stuff, these tournament previews are going to start to be created for a more general audience. So whether you're just looking forward to watching this week's tournament on TV, betting outrights and matchups, playing DFS, or just curious about a new fantasy sport, this video is going to give you all the information you need to do so. We're going to be covering the tournament format, the field, the course they'll be playing on, any weather abnormalities, any player headlines going into the event, and of course, the type or types of players I expect to do well this weekend. So with all of that out of the way, let's hop into this week's show for the Wyndham Championship. Now hopping into the preview for this week, we have the Wyndham Championship as promised before. This is the last regular season event of the quote-unquote super season, and only the top 125 players in terms of FedEx Cup points will be playing after this week for the playoffs. We have plenty, if not most of the field, looking to move into that top 125, and some of the guys that are here that already have spots secured are looking to even bolster their position going into the Tour Championship. So not only will golfers be jockeying for position, you're going to have the regular bounties of riches available for the winner as well. So maybe the best line of all, though, not even counting, the seeding and whatnot, is Will Zalatoris. He's somebody who right now has a special temporary exemption for the PGA Tour. Somebody who earned that through his Korn Ferry Tour excellence. And he's not somebody who's eligible for the FedEx Cup playoffs or even a full PGA Tour member. Because of the way the super season was constructed, he's going to have to wait until after these playoffs to get on the PGA Tour. So even though he's had an excellent season, even though he has a second place at the Masters, a couple close calls in terms of wins as well, he's not going to be there next week. The only way he's going to be able to do that is if he comes through and pulls out a win. If he ends up getting a win, he becomes an automatic PGA Tour member, and as a result would be eligible for the Northern Trust. So with a win as well, he would also crack the top 10 in the FedEx Cup point rankings, which would be absolutely bonkers. He's somebody who hadn't been on the rankings for the entire year, and with just one finish, could see himself in the top 10 on the last event. So huge headline there. I'll definitely be rooting for the guy. Last year's champion at this event was Jim Herman. It came a little bit of a surprise, maybe even a huge surprise. It was his third PGA Tour win, but he was somebody who was coming in with horrible form. He had a bunch of miscuts in a row coming into the Wyndham Championship and found the magic beans to take it all down. Winners before Herman included JT Poston in 2019, Brandt Snedeker the year before, Henrik Stenson, or even Siwoo Kim the whole way back in 2016. You may have noticed that none of those players are bombers. All of them do it with their precision. They're decent putters as well, and you're definitely going to see trends with that when it comes to our course breakdown. For the field, we have a 156 full man field with the top cut line being the top 65 in ties. Normal for a PGA Tour event as well. Some of the notables include Tommy Fleetwood, Ricky Fowler, Jason Kokrak, Hideki Matsuyama. We got Sanjay teeing it up, Louis Oosthuizen, Patrick Reed, Justin Rose, Adam Scott, Webb, and even Matthew Wolff. So plenty of headliners in the field. Kokrak, Sanjay, Hideki, Louis, and Patrick Reed have very strong positions for that FedEx Cup, a couple of them in the top 10 even. So those guys are just looking to bolster their status, looking to get a few extra points while a lot of guys take the week off. And they'll really be looking to compete this week. They could be at home resting, they could be working with their coaches and whatnot, but they've decided to play this week. And as a result, I expect them, especially the ones that are in a good position, to do well. Fleetwood, Ricky, Rose, Adam Scott, Matthew Wolff, they're all looking to get into the top 125, or at least make sure that they're safe for that, those positions. None of them are in a very safe spot, and that's why they're teeing it up. And even though you have all these big names, guarding a lot of the press this week, you're going to have a lot of guys further down the board with even more drama. Last year, we saw guys like Mackenzie Hughes just get through on the last tournament. We saw people like Max Homa make it on the last tournament. And we also saw people like Gary Woodland get pushed out of the top 125 last year at this event. Gary Woodland's teeing it up this time around. He's not leaving that to chance. He wants to go out, make a solid cut, make sure that he's in the top 125. But you're going to expect to see a lot of drama on that end as well. And now to break down the course for this week. We will be playing at Sedgefield Country Club, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is a course we've seen for quite some time. We see it pretty much every year for the Wyndham Championship, and it's a place that we can characterize very easily. It's a short course. It's very much so a wedge and putter type golf course. You're going to make a lot of your scores with the short clubs. And it's also a par 70. It's typically a par 72 for the members, but even the long par 4s that were par 5s before aren't going to be tricky. They're just under 500 yards, and for a PGA Tour player, that's a piece of cake. It measures just 7,127 yards on the official scorecard, and we've seen over the years that length isn't a factor at the Wyndham Championship. All those winners that I mentioned before, Siwoo Kim, JT Poston, Jim Herman, even Henrik Stenson, none of those guys are bombers. They're people that do it with their precision. They put themselves in great opportunities to score off of the tee. And we're going to get into that with my analysis and my key metrics right after this breakdown. In terms of the grass type for this week, we're going to have Bermuda grass fairways and greens. It's just what we saw last week at the FedEx St. Jude Invitational. TPC Southwinds had Bermuda grass. It's something that we hadn't seen for quite some time, but something you guys are going to want to get used to. It's one of the most common surfaces on the PGA Tour. We had a bit of a stretch there where we had a lot of bent grass, a lot of bent POA hybrids, but now it's going to be Bermuda grass season. These are very sticky greens. They are also very sticky when they get wet. So they tend to give some of the players a little bit of trouble. The players that tend to have trouble with Bermuda grass are a little bit more the technical players. People that, like Bryson DeChambeau, for example, people that rely on those greens books, because there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of minute details that go into reading Bermuda grass greens. First of all, you have the grain. I think it's the biggest factor. The biggest thing that slips up with some players is, you have the grain on Bermuda grass. You have dark spots, which signify down grain. You have light spots, which signify that you're going into the grain. So you're not just factoring in slope, you're not just factoring in wind, you're also having to factor in the grain of these greens. So people that do it with a little bit more feel, people that are great putters or around the green players, like Patrick Reed, tend to do well on this surface. There's just a little bit of creativity involved with the grain changes, and you're going to see that play out with the statistics this week. In terms of our greens, in terms of the size of them, they're about 6,000 square feet on average. That's actually above average for a PGA Tour event. I've seen plenty of sources. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to embarrass anyone like that. Say that we have large greens this week. Some pretty large name people, actually, saying that they are some of the smallest on tour. That is just not true. I think that there's a little bit of a reputation for these being quote-unquote small greens because it's a short track. Typically those wedge fests do have small greens, but that's just not the case here. Over 6,000 square feet, that's approaching resort-style greens. The more of the defense here is the undulating greens, I'd say. Most of them are tiered. This is a Donald Ross design. He's somebody who designed Eastlake, which we're going to see for the Tour Championship. Also Detroit Golf Club, which you saw for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Both of those golf courses have greens with a ton of undulation on the fairways at Eastlake at least. And aside from the undulation on the greens, there's not too many similarities between all three golf courses. Like I said before, you have a little bit of a wedge and putting fest here. It's a relatively short golf course. You have a lot of dog legs, and really it prioritizes precision. The winning score here at the Wyndham has been 22 or 21 under par the last 5 years. So obviously scoring here has been relatively easy. And if we take a look at some of the approach shots and what ends up being a little bit more emphasized this week is the 125 to 150 range and the 150 to 175 range are where a majority of your iron shots lie. For this tournament, 82% of your shots lie between those ranges. And for most players on the PGA Tour, those are wedges. Pitching wedge is, about 150 yards. So you're looking at lob wedges, in the smaller range. And for that larger range, 150 to 175, you're looking at a pitching wedge or 9-iron. So they should be able to throw a ton of darts this week, even if they tend to get a little bit fast, the greens at Sedgefield. Because they're able to hit wedges into these greens, the firmness doesn't end up being a factor. Driving accuracy, like I said, is also key. We have some small fairways here, some small targets to hit. We also have tree-lined fairways, which make it tricky as well. Almost every single fairway does dogleg, except for the par 5s. So as a result, making sure you hit the right side of the fairway is almost just as important as hitting it in general. You're going to get blocked out really easily if you hit the wrong side of these doglegs. You might even have to hit layups if that's the case. So like I said, precision off the tee is much more important than distance, and you're going to see guys clubbing down a lot more than usual. You saw people last year like Jim Herman hitting 3-wood almost exclusively for the entire week. Obviously, Henrik Stenson, when he won back in 2017, employed a 3-wood for every single tee shot, except for the par threes. So as a result, distance is still going to be an asset. It's going to show up in the form of your iron play, being able to club down a little bit more than others. But driving accuracy is definitely going to be king at Sedgefield. Real quickly before we hop into my top 3 key metrics, I just wanted to mention a few comparison courses I think that fit well for Sedgefield Country Club. Number 1 would be Harbortown, the home of the RBC Heritage. At Harbortown, you have a lot of tight fairways, a lot of tree-lined fairways that can block you out as well. So you're going to have a lot of similar looks off the tee. You also have a very similar look in terms of the undulating greens. Pete Dye, the designer of Harbortown, loves putting mounds on his greens, loves putting swales, and you're going to see a very similar look in terms of a Donald Ross design. Number 2, I said Colonial, the home of the Charles Schwab Classic. Again, it's a shorter track. It does have small greens, so you are looking at guys that have good precision. You also have the tree-lined fairways, the overhanging limbs. So I also think it's a very good comp course, and we're going to be looking at guys that do well there. And number 3, we have Sea Island Resort, home of the RSM Classic. And while this is a coastal course, which is obviously a little bit different than what we're going to be seeing this week for the Wyndham Championship, it's a shorter golf course. You're looking at guys that are good with their wedges, that are good at putting as well. I mean, Robert Streb won this event. He was also very competitive this year. And we've seen plenty of shorter hitters excel there as well. So I think it's a very good comparison course. And all 3 of these venues are going to be course histories that I look at for this week's event at the Wyndham. Now that we've got a general idea of how the course is going to play, we can cover my top 3 key metrics I'll be incorporating into my analysis for the Wyndham Championship. My approach to identifying the best golfers for any given event takes a combination of a player's course fit, their recent form, as well as their historical baseline numbers in a holistic fashion to give you a sense of how a player is doing recently, how they're fitting that course, really give you a sense as a whole whether they're a good fit or not. By making the process numerical, I'm able to remove the negative effects of bias, of narrative, of human error, to really hunker down on some of the best plays. These top 3 key metrics are the most important stats my modeling will be factoring in this week, but it's far from all of the stats I will be incorporating. Again, we're going to be incorporating these in terms of their course fit to see whether players should do well this week. We're also going to be looking at it in terms of their recent form, weighing these key metrics a little bit more than the most. So, like I said before, it's far from all the statistics that I'll be looking at. But by identifying these top 3 key metrics, my goal is to give you an idea of the types of players that my modeling is going to like. So when identifying these statistics, I use a holistic approach to identifying them as well. I don't just use one train of thought. A majority of the identification is performed using correlational analysis, I must admit though, where I use numerical techniques to identify connections between a golf statistic, whether that be a shots gained number, accuracy number, birdie number, whatever it is, and correlating that to a player's finishing position any given week. And to keep this simple without going into too much detail, just for this video's sake, I'll go into more detail in a future video. But after each iteration of a PGA Tour event, I run correlation analysis on each finishing position for all of their corresponding stats for the entire year. So I'm not looking at how a player played that specific week and then how they did. Obviously, the guys that gained more shots, that hit more fairways, that made more putts are going to do well. But what I think is a lot more useful is taking a look at the stats for the entire year. Obviously, like I said, the statistics of the guy who wins that week are going to be good. But when we take a look at, an entire year's worth of data, we start to get some really interesting trends that come out. That way we can identify courses where, certain ball strikers do well, or courses where putters seem to do well. We're able to make those types of distinctions. As more and more years of data is added, as more and more iterations of a golf format come around, the more accurate this data becomes. So at an event like the Wyndham Championship, where we've seen it for a very long time, it is a regular PGA Tour stop. We're going to have very accurate trends here. Another thing to understand here is that I try to compare these correlations to other courses to make them a little bit more easy to understand. When I'm running this analysis, we do get correlation coefficients. It spits out numerical data, but that numerical data in isolation is a little bit useless. We're looking at correlation numbers. It's hard to make sense of. So as a result, I like to compare these coefficients to all of the other ones that we generate on tour, and we take a look at how they rank compared to the others. So If the correlation coefficient is very high for a certain golf course and it ranks number 1 on tour, like let's say putting this week at the Wyndham was the number 1 ranked stat, we know it would be very important. So by taking it in a relative fashion, we're able to create importance. So that's just to give you an idea of how I do this. I wanted to give you a little bit of the background so that this all makes sense. Also, obviously, taking a look at how it played last year, watching the golf tournament, just having an idea as a golfer myself how golf plays. That also helps with identifying these key stats, but I try to keep it as numerical as I possibly can. With all that being said, though, at number 3 for our key metrics, we have shots gained putting. This week, we're going to be emphasizing Bermuda grass putting, obviously, as that's the surface we will be on. And in terms of my correlation analysis, it comes in as the number 12 course on tour in terms of importance with shots gained putting. It's pretty easy to understand, especially when considering the undulating greens. We're going to have tiered greens. There's going to be plenty of 3 putts. So making sure that you have the correct speed, making sure that you can lag putt is definitely a skill to look for. We're also going to have plenty of putts from closely mown areas as well. At Donald Ross Designs, there are chipping areas. Again, there's not a lot of rough around these greens, so you're going to see plenty of people taking flat stick from off the green. The winning score, like I mentioned before, has fluctuated between 22 and 21 under par, so the ability to make putts is obviously going to have to be there. Bermuda grass greens also tend to give players a little bit of trouble. They can be sticky, like I mentioned before. The grain changes can be hard for some of the more technical players to understand. And not only are the players going to have to account for the Bermuda grass greens, chipping and hitting iron shots out of the rough is next to impossible. Bermuda grass is sticky. It holds a lot of water. And when you're trying to chip, especially in the mornings out of Bermuda grass, good luck. It's much more penal than it is at other golf courses. So accuracy off the tee is not only important due to setting yourself up at the right angle, it's also avoiding the rough. Bermuda grass rough is no joke, especially in the mornings when it has that dew on it. To give you an idea of how important putting is going to be in my modeling this week, on a typical week, it's only weighed about 14.5% in my modeling. Putting is always, somewhat important. I also think it's a little bit overblown at some golf courses, but this week is going to be factored in about 21.75% of my custom modeling. At a golf course where you have to go low, you're not looking for guys just make a few putts that week. You need guys that are good putters to make a lot of putts for them that week. To score 21, 22 under par, you have to be excellent with the flat stick. At number 2, we have birdie or better percentage. This statistic, in terms of correlation, ranks number 11 out of 56 on the PGA Tour. We could also use opportunities gained as well. It also ranks number 11 out of 56 on tour. And if you guys are new to golf, birdie or better percentage is just the percentage of time a player makes a birdie or better on a hole. It's very straightforward. Opportunities gained is a similar statistic. In that way, though, we don't encapsulate putting, right? It's just about how many opportunities less than 15 feet you give yourself on average. It's calculated in a very similar way to shots gained statistics. So it's like how many birdies you gain over your competition on average. And the reason why I think this is important is that it gives us a way to encapsulate some of the more aggressive players on tour. People that make a lot of birdies, a lot of them make a lot of putts. They're very good with their shots gained putting numbers. But a lot of guys that make a lot of birdies too also tend to be very good with their irons. They're very aggressive. They go right at pins. They give themselves 2-3 footers for birdie and whatnot. And last year at Sedgefield, we saw Jim Herman take advantage of that kind of play. He was very aggressive. He shot at every single pin. He didn't play conservatively at all. And as a result, was able to come through with a win. So targeting players who score in bunches, we can identify some of these aggressive players, some of these better iron players as well, while not hunkering down twice on shots gained putting. And at number 1, we have driving accuracy. This is by far the most correlated stat for Sedgefield Country Club. It comes in at number 9 out of 56 courses on tour, meaning there's only 8 other courses on tour where driving accuracy is more important. So like I said before, hitting nice iron shots and making putts is going to be necessary, but making sure you even have the opportunity to do so is even more important. Hitting the wrong side of the fairway at Sedgefield means a layup. If you hit the ball in the rough and it's wet in the morning, it's a layup. If you miss greens, well over and long and you're in the rough, you're not going to get up and down. That chip's going to be next to impossible. So making sure that you're in the fairway, making sure that you have the correct angle into greens is beyond important this week. Perhaps that's why we've seen so many people that hit 3-wood do so well at this golf tournament. Henrik Stenson, probably the best 3-wood player of all time, won this in 2017. But guys like JT Poston, Jim Herman, Siwoo Kim all clubbed down more than 70% of the time en route to their win. Hardly any of them hit drivers. They were people that understood the importance of creating these angles. And it's more than a trend at this point. At this golf tournament, I would be surprised to see people hitting driver much at all. Even last week at TPC Southwind, we saw Harris English use a very similar strategy. TPC Southwind was a little bit different in terms of driving accuracy. It was important, just like it is here, but it was important because of how much water there was. There's water left or right on almost every single hole. So Harris English tried to take that volatility out of the golf course. He hit 3-wood. He's very accurate with that 3-wood. And aside from Sunday, that strategy worked to a T. He was 18 under par through 3 days. Had set the scoring record for the FedEx St. Jude Invitational, one of the biggest tournaments in the world. That Tiger Woods held that record, by the way. So anytime you're beating a Tiger Woods record, you know you're doing something right. And while Harris English isn't going to be in the field for this week's event, I expect a lot of guys to have seen how that works and implement that this week. It's only 7,100 yards. These guys hit 3-woods, 260, 270 yards. That is more than enough length to take this down. I think anyone that takes driver this week is going to be shooting themselves in the foot a bit. And as a result, we're definitely going to be taking a look at driving accuracy. That's all I've got for this week's golf preview stat heads. I cannot wait to see how all the drama unfolds in North Carolina. And of course, next week we get the Northern Trust to kick off the FedEx Cup playoffs. So thanks for watching this week's preview. I really appreciate the viewership a ton. If you're looking for more golf content created specifically for fantasy golf or for PGA DFS, make sure to keep an eye out for my Draftkings picks coming out later today, as well as the plethora of content I drop for DFS and betting throughout each week. On top of my video content, I do also offer access to my PGA Tour Patreon page, where I give full projections for every player in every PGA Tour event. On my Patreon, again, there's full projections for every player, there's winning percentages, my custom model rankings, ownership rankings, game theory notes, and more to come. You also get access to my Discord server where you can ask me questions at any time. I get back to you as soon as I can. It's just $1 for the month right now. Again, you get access to all of the hard data in person that I use as a DFS player myself. And it's a great value at just $1. So once I have all of my tools incorporated on there, I'm going to be adding a lineup builder as well as some of my other course fit models. The price is going to go up. You're getting a lot of value right now for $1. I'm trying to show you guys what I have to offer. So make sure to take advantage before the price goes up. Obviously, again, I really appreciate the support on this channel, for the viewership, for anyone that has subscribed to my Patreon. It really helps me out with growing the channel. It also helps me out with making this my full-time job. That way I'm able to give you guys even better content, even better tools for DFS. So I really appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. Again, that also helps me out with growing the channel. And I'll see you guys next week for the Northern Trust and the start of the FedEx Cup playoffs.